When dedicated nurse Maya Rodriguez risks her life to save a mysterious patient from a hospital fire, she never imagines she'll capture the attention of the city's most powerful billionaire. But as walls of distrust begin to crumble, can two people from different worlds find healing in each other's arms? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. The morning alarm pierced through Maya Rodriguez's dreamless sleep like a siren, demanding her attention, despite the mere 4 hours of rest she'd managed to snatch. At 32, she had mastered the art of functioning on minimal sleep, a necessary skill for an emergency room nurse at Mercy General Hospital, especially one working double shifts to keep her grandmother's medical bills at bay. Maya rolled out of bed, her dark hair falling in messy waves around her face. The apartment was quiet, modest, but clean, with framed photos of her family adorning the walls. Her parents, both lost in a car accident when she was 19, smiled at her from their silver frame, a permanent reminder of why she'd become a nurse in the first place: to save others from experiencing the same loss. Another day, another battle, she whispered to herself, a ritual that had become her morning mantra. Maya quickly showered, the hot water washing away the remnants of yesterday's exhaustion, if only temporarily. Dressed in her light blue scrubs, she grabbed an apple and her travel mug of coffee, essentials for the 12-hour shift ahead. The hospital was already buzzing when Maya arrived, the emergency room a choreographed chaos she had grown to love. "Morning, Rodriguez," called Dr. Patel as she passed. "Ready for another day in the trenches?" Maya smiled, genuine despite her fatigue. "Always, doctor. What's on the board today?" 3 from a car accident coming in, surgery prepping now. 2 rooms need discharge paperwork, and bed 6 needs pain management. Oh, and the VIP in the East Wing private room requested you specifically for his morning check. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Me? Why me?" Dr. Patel shrugged. "Apparently you were the only competent one yesterday." His words, not mine. Maya sighed. The VIP patient had been admitted 3 days ago, an older gentleman with pneumonia who had arrived via private helicopter and immediately demanded a private room. The hospital administration had been walking on eggshells around him, though nobody seemed willing to divulge exactly who he was. "Fine, I'll head there after the morning rounds," Maya said, already moving toward the nurse's station to collect her patient charts. The morning passed in a blur of activity, assessing wounds, administering medications, comforting frightened children, and calming anxious relatives. Maya moved through it all with practiced efficiency, her touch gentle but confident. By noon, she finally made her way to the East Wing, carrying fresh antibiotics for the mystery patient. The private room was unusually quiet when she entered. The elderly man was sitting up in bed, staring out the window at the city skyline. He turned as Maya approached, his intelligent blue eyes assessing her with surprising sharpness for someone battling pneumonia. "You're late," he said, his voice rough but commanding. "Good morning to you too, Mr. Hammond," Maya replied evenly, checking his IV line. "I had several emergency cases this morning." "Emergencies," he repeated, as if testing the word. "Yes, I suppose those would take priority." Something in his tone made Maya pause. There was no entitlement in his voice, rather a curious acknowledgement, as if the concept of not being the most important person in the room was novel to him. "How's the breathing today?" she asked, moving to check his vitals. "Better," he admitted, "though these walls are beginning to close in." "I've spent my life building things, Ms. Rodriguez, not lying in bed watching daytime television." Maya smiled despite herself. "The pneumonia is improving, but your body still needs rest. Maybe I can bring you something to read?" For the first time since she'd met him, Arthur Hammond's stern expression softened slightly. "That would be acceptable. History or biography if you have it. None of those ridiculous romance novels." "I'll see what I can find," Maya promised, making a mental note to bring some books from her own collection during tomorrow's shift. As she turned to leave, he called after her. "My son is coming today. Make sure the staff knows to let him in immediately." "Of course, Mr. Hammond. I'll inform security." Maya continued her rounds, the interaction with the enigmatic patient lingering in her mind. There was something about his eyes, a familiar loneliness she recognized all too well. Behind his gruff exterior was a man isolated by circumstances she couldn't begin to understand. By late afternoon, the emergency room had reached its typical frenetic pace. Maya had just finished assisting with a particularly difficult case, a child with a severe allergic reaction, when the first alarm sounded. At first, she thought it was a code blue, but the distinct pattern registered seconds later. Fire. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. "All available staff to the East Wing," came the overhead announcement. "This is not a drill. Fire protocol is now in effect." Maya's heart dropped. The East Wing, where Hammond was. Without hesitation, she sprinted down the corridor, the smell of smoke growing stronger with each step. Other nurses and doctors were already evacuating patients, their movements swift but controlled to prevent panic. As Maya reached the East Wing, she saw flames licking at the ceiling near the utility room, thick black smoke billowing toward the patient rooms. "Everyone out!" shouted the head nurse, directing the evacuation. "Rooms 701 through 710 clear, moving to 711 through 720 now." "Hammond is in 724, Maya called, already moving toward the end of the hall where the smoke was thickest. "Rodriguez, no! Fire department is on the way. That section isn't safe!" But Maya was already gone, pulling her scrub top over her nose and mouth as she navigated through the increasingly dense smoke. The sprinkler system had activated, water raining down and turning the floor slick beneath her feet. The heat was oppressive, the roar of flames growing louder as she approached room 724. The door was jammed when she reached it, whether from heat warping or debris she couldn't tell. Maya threw her shoulder against it once, twice, ignoring the pain shooting through her arm until finally it gave way. Inside, the room was hazy with smoke. Arthur Hammond was on the floor beside his bed, unconscious, an oxygen tank nearby. Maya's training kicked in immediately. The tank was a potential explosive hazard near the fire. She had to move him now. With strength born of adrenaline, Maya lifted the elderly man, supporting his weight against her shoulder. He was heavier than he looked, and the smoke was making it increasingly difficult to breathe. Every instinct screamed at her to hurry, but she forced herself to move carefully, protecting his head as she navigated back toward the door. The hallway had deteriorated in the brief minutes she'd been in the room. Flames now crawled along one wall, the heat so intense it felt like it was searing her skin. Maya adjusted her grip on Hammond and pressed forward, counting doors as visibility dropped to almost nothing. "Help!" she called out, her voice barely audible over the roar of the fire. "I need help here." Just as her strength began to fail, strong arms reached through the smoke, taking Hammond's weight from her. A firefighter, his face obscured by his mask, motioned for her to follow as he carried the elderly man towards safety. Maya stumbled after them, lungs burning, the world starting to spin from oxygen deprivation. The next moments passed in a blur, breaking through to clean air. Paramedics rushing forward, Hammond being placed on a stretcher, oxygen masks for both of them. The cool evening air, a shocking contrast to the inferno they'd escaped. "You're insane, Rodriguez," Dr. Patel was saying, his face swimming in her field of vision as he checked her vitals. "Brave, but absolutely insane." "Hammond," Maya croaked through the oxygen mask. "Is he—" "Alive, thanks to you," Dr. Patel confirmed. "Smoke inhalation, but stable. You got to him just in time." Maya closed her eyes in relief, allowing herself to be guided to a treatment area. As the adrenaline ebbed, the reality of what she'd done began to sink in. She could have died in that fire, but faced with the choice again, she knew she would make the same decision. It wasn't heroism, it was simply who she was. Hours later, after being treated for minor burns and smoke inhalation, Maya sat on the edge of a hospital bed, now a patient herself. The doctor had insisted she stay overnight for observation, a precaution she would have recommended for anyone else but found frustrating when applied to herself. A soft knock on the door interrupted her thoughts. A tall man in an impeccably tailored suit stood in the doorway, his presence commanding immediate attention. He was strikingly handsome with the same intense blue eyes as Hammond, though his were shadowed with what appeared to be concern, or perhaps guilt. "Ms. Rodriguez?" he asked, his deep voice measured and controlled. Maya nodded, suddenly conscious of her disheveled appearance. Hair singed at the ends, face smudged with soot, despite her best efforts to clean up. "I'm Nathaniel Hammond," he said, stepping into the room. "Arthur Hammond's son." Maya straightened slightly. "Mr. Hammond, is your father all right?" A flicker of surprise crossed Nathaniel's face. "You're asking about my father, after what you just went through?" "He's my patient," Maya said simply. Nathaniel studied her for a moment, as if reassessing his initial impression. "He's stable. The doctors say he'll make a full recovery, thanks to you." He hesitated, then added, "I came to thank you personally. What you did was extraordinary." "I was just doing my job," Maya replied, uncomfortable with his gratitude. "Running into a burning building is not in any nurse's job description, Ms. Rodriguez." "Maya," she corrected automatically. "And maybe not, but leaving a patient behind isn't an option either." Nathaniel Hammond's expression was unreadable as he reached into his jacket pocket and withdrew a business card. "If there's ever anything you need, anything at all, please contact me directly." Maya looked at the card but didn't take it. "That's not necessary, Mr. Hammond." "Nathaniel," he countered, echoing her earlier correction. "And I insist." He placed the card on her bedside table. "My father is not an easy man to impress, Ms. Rodriguez. Yet he specifically requested you as his nurse. Now I understand why." Before Maya could respond, a nurse appeared at the door. "Mr. Hammond, your father is asking for you." Nathaniel nodded, then turned back to Maya. "Rest well. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again." After he left, Maya picked up the business card. "Nathaniel Hammond, CEO, Hammond Enterprises." It read in elegant embossed lettering, followed by contact information. Only then did the pieces click into place. Arthur Hammond wasn't just some wealthy businessman. He was Arthur Hammond, the real estate mogul whose company had reshaped the city's skyline over the last 4 decades, which made his son one of the most powerful men in the state. Maya set the card aside, too exhausted to process the implications. Whatever game the Hammonds were playing, she wanted no part of it. She had enough complications in her life without adding billionaires with savior complexes to the mix. 2 days later, Maya was back at work, despite recommendations that she take additional time off. Her apartment felt too empty, the silence too loud with only her thoughts for company. At least at the hospital, she could lose herself in the rhythm of helping others. "You should be home," Dr. Patel scolded when he spotted her at the nurse's station. "I'm fine," Maya insisted. "And we're short-staffed as it is. At least take it easy. No heroics today, okay?" Maya smiled wryly. "I'll try to avoid any burning buildings." Her first stop was Arthur Hammond's new room. He'd been relocated to another wing after the fire. To her surprise, he was sitting up in a chair rather than in bed, looking remarkably improved. "There she is," he said as she entered, his gruff voice warmer than she'd heard it before. "My guardian angel." Maya checked his chart, hiding her discomfort at the praise. "Your vitals are looking much better, Mr. Hammond. The pneumonia is responding well to treatment." "Thanks to you," he said, watching her closely. "My son told me what you did." "Anyone would have done the same," Maya deflected, adjusting his IV line. "No," Arthur said firmly, "they wouldn't have. Trust me, I have lived long enough to know true courage when I see it." He paused, then added. Nathaniel was impressed. Maya kept her expression neutral. "I met him briefly." "He doesn't impress easily," Arthur continued, a hint of something like amusement in his voice. "Much like his old man." "Well, I'm just glad you're recovering," Maya said, ready to move on to her next patient. "Wait," Arthur called as she turned to leave. "I have something for you." He reached for a paper bag beside his chair and held it out to her. Curious despite herself, Maya opened it to find 3 hardcover books, biographies of historical figures she recognized from her own reading wish list. "You mentioned you'd bring books," Arthur explained. "I thought I'd return the favor." "Thank you," Maya said, genuinely touched by the gesture. "This is very thoughtful." Arthur waved away her gratitude. Small price to pay for my life, I'd say. As Maya continued her rounds, the books tucked safely in her locker, she couldn't help reflecting on the enigma of the Hammonds. Arthur, beneath his gruff exterior, seemed to be showing glimpses of genuine warmth. His son, however, remained a mystery, polished, controlled, and impossible to read. A week passed, and Maya gradually settled back into her routine. The fire had faded from hospital gossip, replaced by newer dramas. Arthur Hammond was discharged, leaving behind a handwritten thank-you note that Maya tucked into one of the books he'd given her. She assumed that would be the end of her interaction with the Hammond family, until the flowers arrived. Not a gaudy, expensive arrangement that screamed of obligation, but a simple bouquet of sunflowers, bright and unpretentious, with a card that read, "Gratitude, like sunflowers, should always face the light. N.H. Secret admirer?" teased Elena, one of the other nurses, as Maya read the card. "Hardly," Maya replied, though she couldn't help but smile at the unexpectedly poetic gesture. The next day brought more sunflowers, and the day after that. By the end of the week, Maya's apartment was filled with their cheerful presents, each bouquet accompanied by a simple note with a different quote about courage, gratitude, or healing. "This is getting ridiculous," Maya muttered to herself as she arranged the latest delivery. She picked up Nathaniel Hammond's business card, which she'd kept on her refrigerator more out of bemusement than any intention to use it. Perhaps it was time to put an end to whatever this was. She dialed the number before she could talk herself out of it. "Nathaniel Hammond's office," answered a crisp, professional voice. I'd like to speak with Mr. Hammond," Maya said, suddenly feeling foolish. "This is Maya Rodriguez." There was a pause then. "One moment, Ms. Rodriguez. Mr. Hammond left instructions to put you through immediately." Before Maya could process this information, Nathaniel's deep voice came on the line. "Maya, I was hoping you'd call." "Mr. Hammond." "Nathaniel," he corrected gently. "Nathaniel," Maya conceded. "I'm calling about the flowers. Do you not like sunflowers? I can send something else." "No, they're beautiful, but unnecessary. You've more than expressed your gratitude. There's no need to continue." There was a brief silence on the line. What if it's not about gratitude anymore? The question caught Maya off guard. "I don't understand." "Have dinner with me," Nathaniel said, his voice losing some of its practiced polish. "Not as a thank you, but because I'd like to get to know the woman who risked her life for my father." Maya's grip tightened on the phone. "I told you I was just doing my job." "And I told you I don't believe that's true," Nathaniel countered. "One dinner, Maya. That's all I'm asking." Every instinct warned Maya to decline. Nathaniel Hammond lived in a world entirely different from hers, a world of privilege and power she neither understood nor trusted. And yet, something in his voice, a note of genuine interest perhaps, made her hesitate. "Just dinner," she found herself saying. "And then no more flowers." Nathaniel's chuckle was warm through the phone line. "Deal. I'll pick you up tomorrow at 7. After hanging up, Maya stared at her reflection in the window, surrounded by sunflowers that seemed to watch her with golden curiosity. What had she just agreed to? And more importantly, what was she going to wear on a date with a billionaire? The next evening, Maya stood in front of her modest closet, second-guessing her decision. The simple black dress she'd chosen suddenly seemed woefully inadequate for dinner with one of the city's most eligible bachelors. But it was the best she had, and she refused to pretend to be someone she wasn't, even for one night. At precisely 7 o'clock, her doorbell rang. Taking a deep breath, Maya opened the door to find Nathaniel Hammond standing there, looking devastatingly handsome in a dark suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Yet to her surprise, he seemed almost nervous. "You look beautiful," he said, his blue eyes taking in her appearance with genuine appreciation. "Thank you," Maya replied, grabbing her purse. "Shall we go?" She had expected a limousine, perhaps, or at minimum a luxury car with a driver. Instead, Nathaniel led her to a sleek but understated sedan, opening the passenger door for her himself. "You drive your own car?" Maya asked before she could stop herself. Nathaniel smiled, a flash of humor lighting his features. "Disappointed? I could call for the helicopter if you prefer." Despite herself, Maya laughed. "No, this is fine. I just expected, well, something different." "I save the ostentation for business associates who need to be impressed," Nathaniel said as he slid into the driver's seat. "Tonight isn't about Hammond Enterprises. It's just dinner between two people." As they drove through the city, Maya noticed how Nathaniel seemed to relax incrementally, his corporate persona giving way to something more genuine. He asked questions about her work, listening with real interest as she described the challenges and rewards of emergency medicine. "What made you become a nurse?" he asked as they arrived at a small, elegant restaurant tucked away on a quiet street. "My parents," Maya replied as he held the door for her. "They died when I was 19, car accident. By the time they reached the hospital, it was too late." Nathaniel's expression sobered. "I'm sorry, Maya. That must have been devastating." "It was," she acknowledged as they were led to a private table overlooking a small garden. "But it also gave me purpose. I wanted to be there for others in their most vulnerable moments. To make a difference, even when I couldn't save everyone." "Like running into a burning building for a cantankerous old man you barely knew," Nathaniel observed, his tone gentle. Maya met his gaze across the table. "Your father isn't nearly as difficult as he wants people to believe." A smile tugged at Nathaniel's lips. "You might be the only person who thinks so, apart from me." As the evening progressed, Maya found herself increasingly drawn to the man beneath the billionaire facade. Nathaniel spoke of his childhood, of growing up with the formidable Arthur Hammond as a father, especially after his mother's death when he was just 12. "He threw himself into work," Nathaniel explained. "Building became his therapy. I think he believed if he could create enough structures, it would somehow fill the void she left behind." "And you?" Maya asked. "What did you do with your grief?" Nathaniel's eyes met hers, surprised by the directness of her question. "I tried to become what he needed, the perfect son, the perfect heir. It wasn't until years later that I realized neither of us had actually dealt with losing her." The vulnerability in his admission resonated with Maya, who recognized in Nathaniel the same kind of loneliness she sometimes saw in her own reflection. Two people shaped by loss, finding different ways to give their pain purpose. "What about you?" Nathaniel asked, skillfully turning the conversation. "Who takes care of the caretaker?" "I manage," Maya said with a small shrug. "That's not an answer," Nathaniel pressed gently. Before Maya could respond, her phone buzzed with an emergency alert from the hospital. "I'm sorry," she said, checking the message. "They need extra hands in the ER. There's been a multi-car pileup on the highway." Without hesitation, Nathaniel signaled for the check. "I'll drive you there." "You don't have to." "I want to," he said simply. The drive to the hospital was swift, Nathaniel navigating the city streets with unexpected efficiency. As he pulled up to the emergency entrance, Maya turned to thank him, only to find him already getting out of the car. "What are you doing?" she asked as he joined her on the sidewalk. "Seeing if I can help," Nathaniel replied. "I'm not a medical professional, but I can hold doors, carry supplies, whatever you need." Maya stared at him in disbelief. "You want to help? In an emergency room? Is that so hard to believe?" Before she could answer, the ambulances began to arrive, their sirens piercing the night. Maya immediately shifted into professional mode, rushing toward the incoming trauma cases. To her surprise, Nathaniel followed, rolling up his sleeves without comment. For the next 3 hours, Nathaniel Hammond, CEO of a billion-dollar enterprise, fetched blankets, distributed water to waiting family members, and even helped an elderly couple navigate the complex emergency room process. He worked quietly, efficiently, without drawing attention to himself or getting in the way of medical staff. It was nearly midnight when the crisis finally abated. Maya found Nathaniel in the waiting room, sitting with a young girl whose parents were both being treated for injuries. And then the princess realized she didn't need the dragon's gold, he was saying, clearly in the middle of an improvised story. She had something much more valuable: courage. The child looked up at him with wide eyes. "Like the nurse who saved your dad from the fire?" Nathaniel's gaze met Maya's over the girl's head. "Exactly like that." Later, as they walked back to his car, an unexpected silence fell between them, The night had not gone as planned, yet somehow it felt more meaningful than any carefully orchestrated dinner could have been. "Thank you," Maya said finally, "for understanding." "For what it's worth," Nathaniel replied. "I think I learned more about you tonight than I would have over a 5-course meal." As they reached her apartment building, Nathaniel walked her to the door, maintaining a respectful distance. "I'd like to see you again, Maya, if you're willing." Maya studied him in the soft glow of the porch light. The Nathaniel Hammond, who had helped comfort frightened families and told stories to a scared child, was a far cry from the corporate titan she had expected. He was real, complicated, unexpectedly kind. "I work the late shift tomorrow," she said, "but I'm free the day after." The smile that spread across Nathaniel's face was genuine, lighting his eyes in a way that made Maya's heart skip. "I'll call you." As she watched him drive away, Maya wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. Nathaniel Hammond represented everything she distrusted: wealth, privilege, power. And yet, tonight she had glimpsed something beneath the surface, something that resonated with her own, carefully guarded heart. Only time would tell if that glimpse was truth or illusion. But for the first time in years, Maya found herself willing to take the risk to find out. Maya's life had taken an unexpected turn since the night of the hospital fire. Over the next few weeks, she found herself navigating an unfamiliar terrain, one where sunflowers appeared at her door with handwritten notes, where her phone buzzed with thoughtful messages throughout her shifts, and where Nathaniel Hammond had somehow become a regular presence in her carefully structured world. "You're seeing him again tonight?" Elena asked as they changed into fresh scrubs at the start of their shift. Her friend's tone carried equal parts curiosity and concern. "We're just getting coffee," Maya replied, trying to sound casual. "After his father's physical therapy session." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Right, just coffee. With a man who could buy the entire coffee plantation if he wanted to." "It's not like that," Maya insisted, though she wasn't entirely sure what it was like. 4 coffee dates, 2 dinners, and 1 memorable afternoon when Nathaniel had surprised her with tickets to the botanical gardens. Each encounter revealed new layers to the man behind the corporate empire, layers that increasingly intrigued her. "Just be careful," Elena advised, her expression softening. "Men like that, they live in a different world than we do." Maya nodded, appreciating her friend's concern while simultaneously bristling at the implication that she needed protection. She had been taking care of herself since she was 19. She knew how to guard her heart. Or at least, she used to. Later that evening, Maya found herself in the hospital's physical therapy wing, observing as Arthur Hammond completed his exercises under the watchful eye of his therapist. The fire had weakened his lungs, requiring regular therapy to rebuild his respiratory strength. To everyone's surprise, the notoriously difficult patient had been model in his adherence to the regimen. "He's making excellent progress," the therapist told Maya as they watched Arthur walk steadily on the treadmill. "His determination is remarkable for a man his age." "Hammonds don't give up," came Nathaniel's voice from behind them. He approached, casually dressed in jeans and a light sweater, looking more relaxed than Maya had ever seen him in their early encounters. "It's both our greatest strength and our most exhausting flaw." The therapist excused herself, leaving Maya and Nathaniel to watch Arthur's session from a distance. "How are you?" Nathaniel asked, his eyes studying her face with the focused attention that still made Maya's pulse quicken. "You look tired." "Double shift," Maya explained. "There was a shortage in pediatrics, so I covered." Nathaniel's brow furrowed. "When was the last time you slept?" "I grabbed a few hours in the break room," Maya said with a dismissive shrug. "It's part of the job." "That doesn't make it healthy," Nathaniel observed, his concern evident. "Coffee might not be enough tonight. Let me take you to dinner instead. Real food, no hospital cafeteria mystery meat." Before Maya could respond, Arthur noticed their presence and waved them over. His breathing only slightly labored as he stepped off the treadmill. "Maya," he greeted her with unexpected warmth. "Checking up on your most memorable patient?" "Just making sure you're following doctor's orders," she replied with a smile. Arthur snorted. "As if I'd risk facing your disapproval. You're more intimidating than my board of directors." Nathaniel laughed, the sound warming something in Maya's chest. "She does have that effect." "You too," Arthur observed, looking between them with shrewd eyes. "Having dinner again?" If Maya will agree, Nathaniel said, turning to her with a questioning look. Something in Arthur's appraising gaze made Maya straighten her shoulders. Actually, I was thinking of heading home. It's been a long day. Disappointment flickered across Nathaniel's face, but he nodded. Of course. Another time. Nonsense, Arthur interrupted. The girl needs to eat, and you need to stop working through dinner yourself. Why don't you both come to the house? Mrs. Collins made her pot roast tonight. Maya blinked in surprise. Your house? Unless you'd prefer the hospital cafeteria, Arthur said dryly. She glanced at Nathaniel, who seemed equally caught off guard by his father's invitation. It's entirely up to you, Maya, he said carefully. No pressure. The sincerity in his voice decided her. Pot roast sounds wonderful, she found herself saying. Thank you, Mr. Hammond. Arthur, he corrected firmly. You saved my life. I think we're well past formalities. The Hammond estate was everything Maya had imagined, and nothing like she expected. The gated property sat on a hillside overlooking the city. The main house an elegant blend of modern architecture and timeless design. Yet despite its grandeur, there was a warmth to the place that surprised her. Family photographs on side tables, well-worn books lining the shelves, a sense that this was a home, not just a showcase of wealth. My mother designed it, Nathaniel explained as he led her through to a comfortable sitting room while Arthur went to freshen up. She wanted a place that would impress clients but still feel like home for a family. Maya studied a photograph on the mantel. A beautiful woman with Nathaniel's eyes, holding a young boy on her lap while a younger Arthur stood proudly beside them. You look like her, she observed. That's what Dad always says, Nathaniel replied, a hint of sadness in his voice. It's why he can hardly look at me sometimes, I think. The unexpected vulnerability in his admission caught Maya off guard. She turned to find Nathaniel watching her, his expression unguarded in a way she hadn't seen before. After she died, he continued quietly, he threw himself into the company. Building bigger, reaching higher, as if he could somehow construct a fortress against grief. I did the same with my studies, my career. We became strangers living in the same house, united only by her absence. And now? Maya asked gently. Nathaniel's gaze drifted to the doorway, where Arthur could be heard speaking to someone, presumably Mrs. Collins, about dinner arrangements. Now we're trying to find our way back to being a family. The fire, and you, gave us a second chance we didn't know we needed. Before Maya could respond, Arthur reappeared, looking refreshed and more at ease than she'd ever seen him at the hospital. Mrs. Collins says dinner is ready. I hope you're hungry, Maya. She cooks as if we're feeding an army. Dinner was served in a cozy dining room, rather than the formal one Maya had glimpsed through an open door. The conversation flowed with surprising ease, Arthur asking thoughtful questions about her work and sharing stories of Nathaniel's childhood that made his son alternately laugh and groan with embarrassment. He was always the serious one, Arthur recalled, a fond light in his eyes. 5 years old, dressed in his little suit, telling my business partners they needed to diversify their portfolios. I did not say diversify their portfolios, Nathaniel protested, though his smile belied his indignation. I believe my exact words were, maybe you should buy different stuff. Maya laughed, trying to imagine a miniature version of the polished businessman beside her, already showing signs of the man he would become. Were you always destined for Hammond Enterprises, then? A shadow crossed Nathaniel's face. It was expected, he said carefully. The Hammond legacy and all that. What would you have done? Maya pressed, curious. If you could have chosen anything? Nathaniel hesitated, glancing at his father. I always loved architecture, the design aspect more than the business side. Creating spaces that change how people live, work, interact. You never told me that, Arthur said, his expression unreadable. You never asked, Nathaniel replied simply, without accusation. A weighted silence fell, broken by Mrs. Collins arriving with dessert. an apple pie that smelled of cinnamon and home. As they ate, Maya observed the two men, sensing the years of unspoken feelings between them, yet also the tentative bridge being built across that divide. Later, as Nathaniel drove her home, Maya found herself unusually quiet, processing the evening. Too much Hammond family drama for one night? Quote, Nathaniel asked, his tone light though his eyes remained serious when they flickered to her face. No, Maya said honestly. It was actually nice seeing you two together. There's a lot of love there, beneath the surface. Nathaniel's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. There is. We're just not very good at showing it. He paused, then added, Thank you for coming tonight. You have a way of making us both more human. When they reached her apartment building, Nathaniel walked her to her door, as had become their routine. This time, however, he hesitated before saying goodnight. Maya, he began, uncharacteristically uncertain. I know we come from different worlds. I know my life, my family, my company. It's all very far from what you're used to. But I want you to know that when I'm with you, none of that matters. You see me, not the Hammond name or the corporate profile. That's rare in my experience. Heart racing. Maya met his gaze. I'm still not entirely sure who you are, Nathaniel Hammond. I'm still figuring that out myself, he admitted with a small smile. But I'd like to discover it with you if you're willing. The kiss, when it came, was gentle, a question rather than a demand. Maya found herself responding, her hands rising to rest lightly against his chest, feeling his heartbeat quicken beneath her touch. When they finally parted, Nathaniel's eyes were darker, his breathing slightly uneven. Good night, Maya, he said softly, stepping back with visible reluctance. Good night, Nathaniel, she replied, equally reluctant to end the moment. As she closed her door, Maya leaned against it, trying to quiet the voice in her head that warned she was falling too fast, too deeply for a man whose world was so different from her own. The voice that reminded her that fairy tales didn't happen to people like her, and that even if they did, they rarely ended well. The following weeks brought an unexpected rhythm to Maya's life. She continued her demanding schedule at the hospital, finding purpose in the controlled chaos of the emergency room. But now there were also quiet dinners with Nathaniel, Sunday brunches that sometimes included Arthur, and increasingly frequent moments when Maya found herself forgetting about the gulf between their worlds. Then came the night that changed everything. Maya was working a late shift when the call came in. Multiple casualties from a building collapse downtown. As the ambulances began arriving, the emergency room transformed into a battlefield, medical staff working frantically to assess and treat the injured. Construction site accident, Dr. Patel explained as he and Maya stabilized a worker with crush injuries. Partial collapse of the east wing. They're still pulling people from the rubble. Maya's blood ran cold. East wing? What building? The new Hammond Tower, I think. Downtown renovation project. The world seemed to tilt beneath Maya's feet. Nathaniel had mentioned the project just yesterday, a cornerstone of his vision for revitalizing the city's downtown area. He had been scheduled to visit the site today. Forcing herself to focus, Maya continued treating patients, moving from one to the next with practiced efficiency, even as her mind raced with worry. It wasn't until hours later, when the initial wave of casualties had been stabilized, that she allowed herself to check her phone. 3 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize, and 1 text message. Ms. Rodriguez, this is James Weston, Mr. Hammond's assistant. Please call urgently regarding Nathaniel. Her hands shaking, Maya stepped into a quiet corner and dialed the number. Ms. Rodriguez, came a clipped, professional voice. Thank you for returning my call. I'm afraid there's been an accident. Nathaniel, Maya said, her voice barely audible. Is he... He's alive, Weston assured her quickly, but injured. He's being transported to Mercy General now. He asked for you specifically. Relief washed over her, followed immediately by renewed concern. How bad is it? The doctors are still assessing. He was trapped for over an hour before rescue teams could reach him. He was on the 3rd floor when the collapse occurred. Maya closed her eyes briefly, imagining Nathaniel trapped in darkness, in pain, waiting for help. I'll be waiting when he arrives. True to her word, Maya was at the ambulance bay when Nathaniel was brought in, pale and bloodied but conscious. His eyes found hers immediately as he was wheeled past, reaching out a hand that she caught briefly in her own. "You're going to be fine," she told him firmly, professional mask in place despite the fear gripping her heart. "The best team is waiting for you." Hours later, after surgeries to repair a broken leg and internal bleeding, Maya finally sat beside Nathaniel's hospital bed, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest, the monitors beeping reassuringly in the background. "You should go home," came Arthur's voice from the doorway. He looked older, the lines in his face deeper as he gazed at his son's unconscious form. "Get some rest. I'll stay with him." Maya shook her head. "I'm fine here." Arthur studied her for a long moment, then nodded once, as if confirming something to himself. He entered the room and took the chair opposite Maya, both of them keeping vigil in silence. "He was checking on safety concerns," Arthur said finally, his voice rough. A worker had reported potential structural issues. Nathaniel went personally to inspect them, insisted on it. "That sounds like him," Maya said softly. "He's changed since meeting you," Arthur continued, surprising her. "More like the boy he was before his mother died. More willing to question, to feel, to connect." He met her gaze directly. "You've been good for him. He's been good for me too," Maya admitted, realizing the truth of it as she spoke. Arthur nodded again, a weary smile touching his lips. "Caroline, my wife, she would have liked you. She always said the measure of a person wasn't in what they accumulated, but in what they were willing to risk for others." The simple statement, coming from this complicated man, touched Maya deeply. Before she could respond, Nathaniel stirred, his eyes fluttering open to focus first on her, then on his father. "Welcome back," Arthur said gruffly, emotion thinly veiled beneath his controlled exterior. "The workers," Nathaniel croaked, his voice dry and strained. "How many—" "Everyone made it out," Maya assured him, her heart aching at his immediate concern for others despite his own condition. "Some injuries, but no fatalities. You got him out in time." Relief washed over Nathaniel's face, followed quickly by a grimace of pain. "Feels like I got hit by a truck." "Close enough," Arthur said. "Half a building fell on you, son." "That would explain it," Nathaniel murmured, his eyes drifting back to Maya. "You're here." "Of course I'm here," she replied, her professional composure finally cracking as she took his hand gently in hers. "Where else would I be?" The days that followed brought a new level of closeness between Maya and Nathaniel, as she balanced her shifts with time spent at his bedside. Despite offers from Arthur to arrange private nursing care, Nathaniel insisted on remaining at Mercy General, much to the surprise of hospital administration. "The care here is excellent," he told his father when Arthur suggested transferring him to a private facility. "And I have a particular interest in supporting this hospital, as you might imagine." The subtle reference to Maya made Arthur roll his eyes, though there was a fondness in his expression that belied his exasperation. "At least let me bring in a more comfortable chair for your nurse when she visits," he conceded. "That plastic monstrosity can't be good for her back." As Nathaniel recovered, Maya found herself increasingly drawn into the Hammond orbit. Business associates came to visit, board members called, and through it all she observed the complex world Nathaniel navigated even from his hospital bed. It was a stark reminder of the differences between them, differences that became even more apparent when she overheard a conversation she wasn't meant to hear. "She's a distraction you can't afford right now," came a clipped, female voice from Nathaniel's room as Maya approached one afternoon. She paused outside the partially open door, recognizing the voice as belonging to Catherine Westfield, Hammond Enterprises' chief financial officer and, according to hospital gossip, Nathaniel's former fiancée. "The board is already concerned about the accident," Catherine continued. "The project delays, the potential lawsuits, the questions about oversight. You need to focus on damage control, not playing house with some nurse who happened to be in the right place at the right time." "That's enough, Catherine." Nathaniel's voice was steel, all traces of the patient gone. "Maya is not a topic for discussion, and my personal life is not a board matter." "It is when it affects the company," Catherine insisted. "Hammond Enterprises needs your full attention, not divided loyalties." What happens when you have to make decisions that affect the hospital? Or when development plans conflict with her neighborhood? Will you still make the right call for the company? The questions hit uncomfortably close to Maya's own unspoken concerns. She had seen firsthand the demands of Nathaniel's position, the weight of responsibility he carried. How could she possibly fit into that equation? Before Nathaniel could respond, Maya backed away silently, unwilling to hear more. She returned to the nurse's station, mechanically checking charts while her mind raced. Catherine's words had given voice to the doubts that had lingered at the edges of Maya's growing feelings for Nathaniel. That evening, when she finally visited his room, Nathaniel immediately sensed something was wrong. "What is it?" he asked, setting aside the tablet he'd been working on. "You've been avoiding me all day." Maya hesitated, then decided on honesty. "I overheard Catherine Westfield earlier." Understanding dawned in Nathaniel's eyes, followed by frustration. "Maya, whatever she said." "She raised valid points," Maya interrupted. "About your responsibilities, about the company needing your focus, about us being from different worlds." "That's not for her to decide," Nathaniel said firmly. "But it's something we need to consider," Maya countered. "Your life, your position, it comes with obligations I can't even begin to understand. And my work, my patients, they need me fully present too." Nathaniel studied her face, his expression softening. "Come here," he said, patting the edge of his bed. When she reluctantly sat beside him, he took her hand. "Do you know what I thought about when I was trapped under that rubble?" Maya shook her head. "You," he said simply. "Not the company, not the board, not the development projects. Just you, and all the things I hadn't yet told you." "Nathaniel." "Let me finish," he said gently. "All my life, I've done what was expected of me. I've been the heir, the CEO, the Hammond who would expand the legacy. And I was good at it, because I didn't know any other way to be." He squeezed her hand. "Then you ran into a burning building to save my cantankerous father. And suddenly I saw a different kind of courage. A different way of measuring what matters." Maya felt tears threatening and blinked them back. "That doesn't change the reality of our situations." "No," Nathaniel agreed. "But it changes how I want to navigate that reality moving forward." He shifted, wincing slightly at the movement. "I'm not asking you to fit into my world, Maya. I'm asking if we can build something new together, something that honors both of our paths." The sincerity in his eyes made Maya's heart ache with hope and fear in equal measure. "I don't know if that's possible," she admitted. "Neither do I," Nathaniel said with unexpected honesty. "But I'd like to try, if you would." Before Maya could respond, a commotion in the hallway caught their attention. Raised voices, hurried footsteps, and then Arthur appeared in the doorway, his face ashen. "Dad?" Nathaniel straightened, immediately alert. "What's wrong?" "Hammond Tower," Arthur said grimly. "The rest of the East Wing just collapsed. Emergency crews are on site, but—" he glanced at Maya. "They're saying there are people trapped. Workers who went back in to retrieve equipment." Maya was already on her feet, professional instincts taking over. "I need to get to the ER. They'll be bringing casualties here." "Maya," Nathaniel called as she headed for the door. She turned back to find his eyes locked on hers, a world of unspoken feeling in their depths. "Be careful." She nodded once, then hurried out, already mentally preparing for the trauma cases to come. As she ran toward the emergency room, Maya pushed aside her personal concerns, focusing entirely on the task ahead. The conversation with Nathaniel would have to wait. Right now, people needed her, not as Maya Rodriguez, the woman torn between two worlds, but as Nurse Rodriguez, whose steady hands and calm presence might mean the difference between life and death. And in that moment of clarity, as she donned trauma gear and prepared to receive the injured, Maya realized that perhaps the answer to their dilemma lay not in choosing between worlds, but in recognizing the core values that united them across the divide, For both she and Nathaniel, when faced with crisis, instinctively put others first, he by rushing to inspect safety concerns, she by running toward danger rather than away from it. It wasn't a solution, not yet, but it was a foundation upon which solutions might be built. The emergency room became a battlefield as casualties from the second collapse arrived in waves. Maya moved between trauma bays with practiced efficiency, her hands steady despite the chaos around her. A construction worker with a crushed arm, a site engineer with a head injury, an inspector with broken ribs and a punctured lung, each case requiring her full concentration, pushing all personal thoughts aside. Hours passed in a blur of urgent procedures, shouted orders, and the constant, reassuring beep of monitors confirming lives still hung in the balance but hadn't yet been lost. It wasn't until nearly dawn, when the final victim had been stabilized and moved to intensive care, that Maya allowed herself to exhale fully. "You should get some rest," Dr. Patel said, finding her updating charts at the nurse's station. "You've been on your feet for over 18 hours." Maya nodded wearily, realizing she had worked straight through her shift and well into the next. "I'll head out soon, just need to finish these notes." As the adrenaline of the crisis faded, the weight of everything, her conversation with Nathaniel, Catherine Westfield's cutting remarks, the physical exhaustion of the marathon shift, crashed over her like a wave. Maya found herself walking not toward the exit, but toward Nathaniel's room, drawn by a need she couldn't quite name. She paused outside his door, surprised to find it partially open despite the early hour. Peering in, she saw Nathaniel sitting up in bed, surrounded by papers and digital tablets, deep in conversation with several serious-faced men in suits. Arthur stood by the window, his posture rigid as he listened to what appeared to be a heated discussion. "The liability is substantial," one of the men was saying. "2 collapses within a week. The investigation will focus on negligence, possibly criminal charges." "We followed every code requirement," Nathaniel countered, his voice firm despite the fatigue evident in his face. "The inspection reports were clear." "Reports can be altered," another man suggested quietly, "particularly if certain parties were aware of potential issues before the first incident." Maya's breath caught. Was he suggesting that Nathaniel falsified documents? "That's not how Hammond Enterprises operates," Nathaniel said, steel in his tone. "We'll cooperate fully with investigators. If mistakes were made, we'll acknowledge them and make it right." "Your ethical stand is admirable," the first man replied, clearly unimpressed. "But it could cost the company millions, not to mention your position as CEO if the board loses confidence." Arthur finally spoke from his position by the window. "My son has made his decision, gentlemen. Hammond Enterprises will conduct itself with integrity, as it always has under my leadership and now under his." The unexpected support from his father seemed to strengthen Nathaniel's resolve. "Prepare a full statement acknowledging the incidents and outlining our commitment to a transparent investigation. We'll establish a fund for the injured workers and their families, separate from any legal settlements. And I want a complete review of all current projects, safety protocols, materials, contractors, everything." The men exchanged glances, but nodded reluctantly. As they gathered their materials to leave, one of them noticed Maya standing in the doorway. A flash of recognition crossed his face, followed by a barely concealed look of disdain. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion at a more appropriate time," he suggested pointedly, "when there are fewer distractions." Nathaniel followed his gaze, his expression softening immediately upon seeing Maya. "Ms. Rodriguez is not a distraction," he said firmly. "She's a valued member of this hospital staff who just spent the night saving the lives of our workers. Show some respect." The reprimand hung in the air as the men filed out, each nodding stiffly to Maya as they passed. When they were gone, Nathaniel extended a hand toward her. "You look exhausted," he said softly as she approached his bed. "Are you all right?" "I should be asking you that," Maya replied, noticing the dark circles under his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "You should be resting, not holding board meetings." Arthur cleared his throat. "I'll give you 2 a moment," he said, heading for the door. He paused beside Maya, placing a weathered hand briefly on her shoulder. "Thank you," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of everything left unspoken. When they were alone, Nathaniel sighed deeply, setting aside the last of his papers. "What a mess," he murmured. 2 collapses, multiple injuries, years of work potentially compromised, and my father and I are finally on the same page. The universe has a twisted sense of humor. Despite everything, Maya found herself smiling. Silver linings in strange places. Nathaniel studied her face. "You haven't slept. Neither have you. I heard about the second wave of casualties," he said, concern evident in his voice. "How bad?" "We didn't lose anyone," Maya replied, professional pride mingling with profound relief. "There were some close calls, but everyone's stable for now." Nathaniel closed his eyes briefly. "Thank God. And thank you. And your team." Something in his genuine gratitude, the absence of entitlement that might have been expected from someone of his position, touched Maya deeply. She sank into the chair beside his bed, suddenly too tired to remain standing. "I overheard what those men were suggesting," she admitted. "About altering reports." Nathaniel's expression hardened. "That's not who I am. Not who my father raised me to be, despite our differences." "I know," Maya said simply. And she did know, with a certainty that surprised her. In the weeks since they'd met, she had glimpsed the core of integrity beneath Nathaniel's polished exterior, the compassion that balanced his business acumen. "They're worried about the company," Nathaniel explained, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "About stock prices and investor confidence. And they're not entirely wrong to be concerned." "But you're thinking about the workers," Maya observed, "and their families, the people who trusted Hammond Enterprises to provide a safe environment." Nathaniel met her gaze directly. "Just as patients trust you with their lives every day." The parallel struck Maya forcefully. Despite the vast differences in their professional worlds, they shared a fundamental commitment to the well-being of those in their care. It was a connection she hadn't fully appreciated until this moment. "What will happen now?" she asked, genuine concern in her voice. "Investigations. Probably lawsuits. A significant financial hit to the company." Nathaniel's matter-of-fact tone belied the gravity of the situation. "But we'll survive. Hammond Enterprises was built to weather storms." "And you?" Maya pressed. "What happens to you if the board loses confidence?" A wry smile touched Nathaniel's lips. "I suppose I'd finally have time to explore that architecture career I mentioned." Before Maya could respond, a nurse appeared at the door. "Ms. Rodriguez? Dr. Patel asked me to remind you that you're scheduled again tonight, and he insists you go home and get some sleep." Maya nodded, reluctantly rising from the chair. "He's right. I should go." "Maya," Nathaniel said as she turned to leave, "about our conversation earlier, before all this happened. I meant what I said. Whatever comes next, I want to face it with you beside me." The simple declaration, made in the midst of professional crisis and personal exhaustion, carried a weight that settled deep in Maya's heart. She thought of all the reasons they shouldn't work, their different worlds, the demands of their careers, the complications that would inevitably arise. But she also thought of his steadfast integrity, his concern for others above himself, the connection that had grown between them despite every obstacle. "Get some rest, Nathaniel," she said softly. "We'll talk when we're both thinking clearly." It was neither a rejection nor an acceptance, but a pause, a space to breathe before decisions that would shape both their futures. The investigation into the Hammond Tower collapses moved swiftly, dominating local news and business publications. Maya followed the developments from a distance, her demanding schedule at the hospital providing little time for much else. Nathaniel had been discharged, but was still limited by his injuries, relying on crutches and physical therapy to regain mobility. They spoke daily, sometimes just brief check-ins between her shifts, other times longer conversations as they both processed the ongoing fallout from the incidents. Through it all, Nathaniel maintained the transparent approach he had promised, cooperating fully with investigators and making good on his commitment to support the injured workers. 2 weeks after the second collapse, Maya arrived home from a shift to find Nathaniel waiting outside her apartment building, leaning on his crutches but standing tall, despite his obvious discomfort. "What are you doing here?" she asked, surprised by his unexpected appearance. "You should be resting that leg." "Some news can't be delivered over the phone," he replied, his expression unreadable. "Do you mind if we talk inside?" In her apartment, Maya watched as Nathaniel carefully lowered himself onto her couch, setting his crutches aside. The space felt smaller with his presence, though he seemed at ease in the modest surroundings. "The investigation results came back today," he said without preamble. "There was negligence, but not on Hammond Enterprises' part. The concrete contractors substituted inferior materials and falsified quality control reports." Maya sat beside him, relief washing over her. "So you're cleared?" "Legally, yes. But the board still has concerns about oversight, about how this happened on my watch." Nathaniel's gaze was steady as he continued. "They've asked my father to step back in as interim CEO while they evaluate the situation." "Oh, Nathaniel," Maya said softly, reaching for his hand. "I'm so sorry." To her surprise, a smile touched his lips. "Don't be. For the first time in my adult life, I feel free." "Free?" Maya echoed, confused by his reaction. "Since I was 18, I've been following a path that was predetermined. Hammond heir. Hammond executive. Hammond CEO. I never questioned it. Never considered alternatives." His fingers tightened around hers. "But these past few weeks, watching you work, seeing the direct impact you have on people's lives, it's made me reevaluate what success really means." Maya studied his face, seeing a lightness there she hadn't noticed before, despite the serious circumstances. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that maybe Catherine Westfield was right, but for all the wrong reasons. Maybe my focus has been divided, but not between you and the company. Between who I am and who I've been trying to be." The revelation hung between them, profound in its implications. Maya had been so focused on the external differences between their worlds that she hadn't fully considered Nathaniel's internal struggle, the weight of expectations he'd carried his entire life. "What will you do?" she asked. "In the short term, I'm still on the board, still a major shareholder. I'll help my father navigate the transition while I recover. But after that—" He paused, a new excitement entering his voice. "I've been thinking about starting a different kind of development company. One focused on community needs, affordable housing, healthcare facilities, green spaces. Using the Hammond resources and connections for projects that serve people first, profit second." Maya could hear the passion in his voice, see the vision taking shape in his mind. It was a side of Nathaniel she had glimpsed before but never seen so fully expressed. "That sounds amazing," she said honestly. "But what about your father? The Hammond legacy?" "That's the surprising part," Nathaniel said with a small laugh. "It was Dad's idea. Arthur suggested this?" Maya couldn't hide her shock. Apparently nearly dying in a fire and then watching your son almost get crushed gives a man perspective. Nathaniel's expression softened. "He said something that stuck with me. He said the Hammond legacy isn't buildings or bank accounts, it's the impact we have on the lives around us." It sounded like something my mother would have said. "Or something you would say," Maya observed gently. Nathaniel nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "I've been so busy trying to fill my father's shoes that I forgot he was once a young man with ideals too, before grief and business hardened him." The transformation in both Hammond men touched Maya deeply. She thought of Arthur, so difficult and demanding when she first met him, now supporting his son's vision rather than imposing his own. And Nathaniel, finding his authentic path after years of following expectations. "There's one more thing," Nathaniel said, reaching into his jacket pocket. "The first project I want to pursue." He handed her a folded set of architectural renderings. Maya opened them carefully, gasping softly as she recognized the location. It was the land adjacent to Mercy General, currently an abandoned lot that the hospital had long hoped to acquire for expansion. "A new emergency care wing," Nathaniel explained as she examined the detailed drawings. "State-of-the-art facilities, additional treatment rooms, expanded trauma capabilities, and improved staff areas including proper rest facilities." He pointed to a section of the plans. No more catching sleep in uncomfortable break room chairs between double shifts. Tears pricked at Maya's eyes as she traced the thoughtfully designed spaces with her fingertip. "This is incredible, but the hospital has been trying to purchase this land for years." The owner refuses to sell. The owner has been persuaded, Nathaniel said with a small smile. It seems he respects healthcare workers who run into burning buildings. Realization dawned. Arthur owned the land? Nathaniel nodded. A Hammond Enterprises holding. Dad is donating it to the hospital as part of the new project. He's also establishing a nursing scholarship in your name. Overwhelmed, Maya set the plans aside, struggling to process the magnitude of what Nathaniel was sharing. Why would he do that? Because you saved his life, Nathaniel said simply. But more than that, because you helped him reconnect with his humanity, with me. He took her hands in his. Maya, I know our worlds still seem far apart. I know there are 1,000 practical reasons why this shouldn't work. But when I look at you, I don't see a nurse and a developer, or different economic backgrounds, or conflicting priorities. I see two people who believe in putting others first, in doing what's right even when it's difficult, in creating spaces, whether in hospitals or in cities, where people can heal and thrive. The sincerity in his voice, the clarity of his vision, resonated deep within Maya's heart. All the doubts that had plagued her, the fear that they were too different, that she would never fit into his world or he into hers, began to dissolve in the face of this new understanding. I've been so focused on our differences, she admitted. I never fully appreciated our common ground. So have I, Nathaniel agreed. But these past weeks have shown me that what connects us is far stronger than what separates us. He shifted slightly, wincing as he adjusted his injured leg. I'm not asking for promises or commitments right now, just a chance to explore this path together, to see where it leads. Maya looked at the architectural plans again, seeing in them not just a building, but a bridge between their worlds, a physical manifestation of the connection they had forged against all odds. I think, she said slowly, that I would like that very much. The relief and joy that spread across Nathaniel's face made her heart swell. He leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that felt like both a promise and a new beginning. 6 months later, Maya stood on the vacant lot beside Mercy General, watching as Arthur Hammond, looking healthier and more vibrant than she had ever seen him, addressed the small crowd gathered for the groundbreaking ceremony of the new emergency care wing. Hammond Enterprises has built skyscrapers and shopping centers, luxury apartments and office complexes, Arthur was saying, his voice strong despite his years. But no project has ever meant more to me personally than this one. Beside her, Nathaniel squeezed Maya's hand, his crutches long since abandoned as his injuries had healed. He had spent the past months dividing his time between helping his father stabilize Hammond Enterprises and developing his new community-focused venture, which he had named, with a touch of sentimentality that still surprised Maya, Phoenix Development, rising from the ashes of the tower collapse to create something new and meaningful. None of this would be possible, Arthur continued, without the courage and compassion of one extraordinary individual. He turned toward Maya, beckoning her forward. Maya Rodriguez didn't just save my life in that hospital fire. She reminded an old man and his son what truly matters. That the measure of our success isn't in the height of our buildings, but in the depth of our impact on others. Reluctantly, Maya joined Arthur at the podium, uncomfortable with the attention, but moved by his words. The Maya Rodriguez Emergency Care Wing will serve thousands of patients each year, Arthur announced. And the scholarship program bearing her name will train a new generation of nurses who embody her dedication and bravery. As applause rippled through the crowd, Maya caught sight of Elena and several other colleagues from the hospital, beaming with pride. Dr. Patel gave her a thumbs up, his usual serious expression replaced by a genuine smile. Arthur handed Maya a ceremonial shovel, then stepped back to join his son. Together, the three of them turned the first soil on what would become not just a building, but a symbol of transformation, both for the community and for themselves. Later, as the crowd dispersed and workers began the preliminary site preparation, Maya found a moment alone with Nathaniel and Arthur. "Thank you," she said simply, the words inadequate for the emotions swelling in her chest. "For all of this?" "No, my dear," Arthur replied, his blue eyes, so like his son's, bright with feeling. "Thank you for reminding us what the Hammond name should stand for." As Arthur moved away to speak with the project manager, Nathaniel wrapped an arm around Maya's waist, drawing her close. "Happy?" he asked softly. Maya looked around at the activity buzzing around them, the beginning of a project that would save lives. The physical manifestation of bridges built between worlds that once seemed impossibly distant. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, echoing words she had heard Nathaniel say months ago. "You know," Nathaniel said thoughtfully, "most people think courage is about dramatic rescues and burning buildings. But I've learned it's also about everyday choices. The courage to question your path, to be vulnerable, to reach across divides." Maya nodded, understanding completely. The courage to let someone in, even when you're afraid they'll leave. To believe in possibilities instead of limitations. As the sun began to set over the city skyline, a skyline shaped in part by the Hammond family legacy, Maya and Nathaniel stood together on the threshold of something new. Not a fairy tale ending, but a beginning built on shared values and mutual respect, on seeing each other fully and choosing to walk forward together, despite the challenges that would inevitably come. For Maya, who had spent years defining herself by her work, by the walls she had built around her heart after losing her parents, this was perhaps the greatest act of courage yet, believing that sometimes, against all odds, different worlds could collide in the most beautiful ways. That sometimes, a fire that threatened to destroy could instead become the catalyst for rebuilding something stronger, more meaningful, more true. And as Nathaniel's fingers intertwined with hers, Maya knew with absolute certainty that some risks, like running into burning buildings or opening your heart when all logic warned against it, were worth taking. Because sometimes, on the other side of fear, lay not just survival but a life transformed by the courage to reach for something more. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.